People often think that most of the oxygen we breathe comes from trees. However, about 70% is produced by marine plants. And terrestrial ecosystems actually produce only 28% of the oxygen. The ocean produces oxygen mainly through phytoplankton and marine algae plants. Phytoplankton are microscopic single-celled organisms that have the ability to photosynthesize, convert carbon dioxide and sunlight into sugars that they use for energy, and oxygen is generated as a byproduct of this process. One type of phytoplankton, the Prochlorococcus, release countless tons of oxygen into the atmosphere, and have achieved fame as the most abundant photosynthetic organism on the planet. And it is estimated that they provide oxygen for 1 out of every 5 breaths we take. These tiny, free-floating creatures live in the surface layer of oceans, lakes and rivers. They form the basis of the marine food chain, so almost all life in the sea depends on phytoplankton. And despite being so tiny, 200 million tons of phytoplankton grow in the world's oceans every year. That's 10 times the weight of the entire human population on our planet. Humans have explored less than 5% of the world's oceans, and this is because the pressure exerted by the ocean water is enormous. In fact, it is easier to take a person into space than it is to send a person to the bottom of the ocean. For example, more people have gone to the moon than to the Mariana Trench. In the history of mankind, 12 people have set foot on the moon, but only 3 people have made it to the Mariana Trench because of the extreme conditions there. Being at the bottom of the Mariana Trench is equivalent to being crushed by 100 adult elephants, and the pressure at the deepest point of the ocean is equivalent to being crushed by 50 jumbo jets. But even so, there are creatures in these very deep waters that survive in extreme conditions, with small amounts of oxygen, extreme cold, zero sunlight, and also most rely on food sinking from above. Although it could be considered nearly impossible to actually measure the number of sunken ships that have been on the ocean floor, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has estimated that there are at least 1 million sunken ships in the world's oceans. And other estimates say there could be as many as 3 million. Although this includes wrecks from throughout human history, from canoes to 21st century wrecks. It is also estimated that the amount of treasure discovered within the ocean could be valued at over $60 billion. There are even more historical artifacts under the sea than in all the world's museums. Apart from shipwrecks and other archaeological artifacts, a lost city can also be found underwater. Archaeologists discovered the lost city of Heraklion off the coast of Egypt in 2000, long thought to be simply a legend. You can see the Great Barrier Reef from the moon, and this coral reef is approximately the size of 70 million soccer fields. There are thousands of individual reefs that make up the Great Barrier Reef, and it is home to millions of different sea creatures. 10% of all fish species and 25% of all known marine species find their home or food on the Great Barrier Reef. Coral reefs are really important, as they cover less than 1% of the seafloor, but are home to up to 1/4 of all known marine species. Because the architecture and chemistry of coral is so similar to human bone, coral has been used to replace bone grafts and help human bones heal quickly and cleanly. Because the sun only illuminates part of the ocean surface, and half of the planet constantly experiences night, up to 99% of the ocean is in complete darkness all the time. So, if the sun can only illuminate 25% of the total depth of the water, it means that heat cannot enter beyond that point, so the ocean is very cold in its depths. And also, the cold water being very dense, it sinks faster to the bottom of the ocean. However, there are hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. These are like hot springs or geysers, and they can push very hot water directly into the deeper parts of the ocean, making some parts of the ocean floor significantly warmer. Life originated in our oceans about 3.2 billion years ago, but only reached land about 440 million years ago, meaning that about 86% of evolutionary history happened underwater. 95% of life on our planet is found in the oceans, but because they have been little explored, it is currently estimated that 91% of the species that exist under the sea have not yet been discovered. Even so, about 1.5 million ocean species have been named and classified, but marine biologists estimate that millions more remain to be discovered. The Arctic produces between 10,000 and 50,000 icebergs per year. Icebergs typically have a lifespan of 4 years and begin to enter shipping lanes after about 3 years. One Antarctic iceberg is so large that it holds more than 20 billion gallons of water, which could possibly supply drinking water for 1 million people for 5 years. If all the glaciers and sea ice sheets in the Arctic melted at the same time, sea level would rise about the height of a 26-story building. Aquatic life can survive temperatures at the poles because Antarctic fish have natural antifreeze. The fish's antifreeze proteins prevent the cold from freezing their blood and allow it to keep flowing. Ocean exploration began at least 5,000 years ago, when the Egyptians built the world's first sailing ships. However, scientists began mapping the ocean floor throughout the 1900s, particularly after World War II. Science estimates that about 20 million years ago, the Atlantic Ocean did not exist. Back then, there was a valley separating the continents that eventually became the ocean basin we know today as the Atlantic. All this change was brought about by several factors, such as plate tectonics and submarine volcanoes. The Mediterranean Sea used to be dry. It was a dry basin until about 5 million years ago, but during the Zancledian flood, water from the Atlantic poured through the Strait of Gibraltar and filled the basin. There are many theories about how this happened, one of the most popular being that the basin was filled in just 2 years, thanks to a huge torrent of water. Drinking salt water is very dangerous and can even be deadly, so humans are trying to make the ocean drinkable, with a process called desalination. The salt is removed, leaving fresh water. But this process is not very common, because the construction of facilities and the energy required to process water in this way is much more expensive than using water from potable sources. Most of the world's major cities are near the sea. Of the 10 largest cities in the world, 8 of them are coastal cities. According to reports, 40% of the world's population lives within an hour's drive of the nearest ocean. Living near the ocean provides economic and ecological benefits. The development of cities close to the ocean allowed the population to have easier access to food and transportation. Greenland sharks can live more than 400 years. This means that there are currently Greenland sharks swimming around the Arctic that were born in the 17th century. 90% of all volcanic activity occurs in the oceans. The Pacific Ocean is the largest body of water in the world. Its area covers at least 1/3 of the Earth's total surface and is home to some 25,000 islands.